You know what's wild? People aren't just talking about leaving America's big cities anymore. They're doing it in record numbers. The U.S. Census Bureau says more than 8.6 million Americans moved out of major metros between 2020 and 2025, the biggest urban flight since World War II. And it's not slowing down. 2026 is shaping up to be another year of mass migration. Crime is up in nearly 60% of large U.S. cities. Housing costs have jumped 45% nationwide since 2020, and urban infrastructure is literally falling apart. So yeah, this isn't just a trend, it's a collapse in motion. Families, small business owners, even lifelong locals are cashing out and heading for safer, cheaper, saner ground. Whether it's runaway taxes, failing schools, or downtowns that now look like post-apocalypse movie sets, millions are done waiting for a fix. Let's take a look at the top 10 collapsing cities everyone is leaving in 2026 and find out where the American dream is packing its bags next. 10. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland isn't just bleeding numbers, it's hemorrhaging them. The city that once rode the back of steel and auto industry is now struggling to reinvent itself. Between 2020 and 2024, Cleveland's population dropped by an estimated 4.1%. According to World Population Review data. But that's just the tip of the decline iceberg. Economic stagnation in the Rust Belt continues to sap the life out of places that once hummed with factories and blue-collar opportunity. Younger people leave in droves. College grads realize their hometown doesn't offer a chance, so they bounce to bigger metros in the South or Southwest. Crime, aging infrastructure, school system underfunding, and a shrinking tax base all combine into a spiral. The downtown gets occasional glimmers of revitalization, some new development, arts projects, but those almost always serve as islands of prosperity in a sea of decay. The cost per resident to maintain roads, bridges, water systems, and public services keeps rising even as the number of payers shrinks. And here's one few analysts mention. Every time a major company relocates or downsizes, Cleveland doesn't recover like it used to. The economic multipliers are weaker now. Expect a further 1.3% drop heading into 2025-26 unless something dramatic changes. 9. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is a textbook case of contraction under duress. The city has been losing population steadily. Its peak was near 950,000 in 1950. But over each subsequent census, it slid. Public safety concerns, homicide rates, property crime dominate headlines and drive fear, deterring middle-class residents from staying. Schools struggle, neighborhoods deteriorate, municipal resources are stretched, and the tax base struggles to keep up. One thing few people emphasize, the fragmentation of governance and municipal boundaries in the Baltimore area means that those who leave the city often don't leave the region. They just move into wealthier corridors or suburbs, but the city proper loses both tax revenue and human capital. While some revitalization projects in neighborhood commercial corridors and waterfront areas exist, they're often too isolated to reverse the broader trend. Also, real estate and insurance costs are rising faster in distressed areas, making it hard to flip the equation. Many homeowners are underwater and can't invest in repairs, leading to decay. Experts warn Baltimore could lose another 1.2 to 1.5% of its core city population by 2026 unless stabilization is prioritized. 8. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis is a cautionary tale in how governance and geography can doom a city. Because the city is legally distinct from the surrounding county, as people move into suburbs or adjacent areas, the city's population numbers decline, even when the broader metro remains stable or grows. That independent city versus county suburb setup is part of the bleed. Jobs, schools, services often shift outward, and many families simply follow. Add crime, underperforming public schools, aging housing stock, and delayed infrastructure maintenance, and the result is compounding outflow. The city has periodically tried incentives and redevelopment, but city roots are deep and structural. In recent decades, St. Louis has been used as a case study in long-term urban decline. Some neighborhoods have seen pockets of comeback, but the scale is tiny compared to what's lost. Census and demographic analysts expect another 1.82% drop from 2025 to 2026 in the city proper if current trends persist. 7. Detroit, Michigan. Detroit has been on the chopping block for decades, but 2026 might mark a verdict. Once the roughest poster child of urban collapse, it's seen pockets of revival downtown and midtown, new businesses, redevelopments, arts districts. But most of Detroit is still in slow-motion collapse. The city's population peaked in 1950 and since then has lost over 1.2 million residents, about 65% decline. What most people don't focus on, debt, legacy pension obligations, shrinking city footprint, and a continually shrinking middle class, make the recovery uphill. When a city's very boundaries shrink, vacant lots, demolished blocks, maintaining even basic services becomes exponentially more expensive per resident. Young talent is in an exodus. They move to suburbs or to other states with stronger economies. The auto industry no longer provides the ballast it once did. Detroit's projected 2025-26 decline could be 1.5 to 1.8%. The distressed parts of the city are so neglected that entire blocks vanish. The revival that exists is uneven, mostly concentrated in pockets, and often inaccessible to people in the outer zones who can't afford to bridge the gap. 6. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans has charm, culture, and resilience, but also one foot in a collapse spiral. Frequent flooding, climate, risk, rising insurance costs, and shifting demographics all exert relentless pressure. Many families relocate inland after repeated storms. Insurance becomes unfeasible. The tourism economy remains vital, but it's brittle. For long-term residents, the math doesn't work. Add in crime, uneven school systems, and municipal budget strains, and the leak accelerates. Analysts pointed to New Orleans among the top cities people are quitting in 2025. The real kicker few talk about: repetitive disaster recovery fatigue. After multiple storms, levee failures, and rebuilding cycles, many residents just don't want to rebuild again. The social glue phrase, the risk of being temporarily displaced, becomes permanent. Expect a further decline of 1.3–1.5% in 2026 if mitigation doesn't escalate. 5. Portland, Oregon. Here's the thing: Portland was once the darling of the Pacific Northwest. The city everyone wanted to move to for its indie cafes, green vibes, and keep Portland weird charm. But fast forward to 2026, and Portland's magic is wearing thin. People aren't moving in. They're packing U-Hauls and heading out. Between 2020 and 2024, the Portland Metro saw over 32,000 residents leave, according to the U.S. Census Bureau and Oregon Employment Department data. That's not migration. That's an evacuation with coffee stains. The reasons stack higher than Mount Hood: skyrocketing housing prices, record property crime, homelessness on nearly every downtown block, and city leadership caught in a political gridlock that would make D.C. blush. And it's not just perception. Portland's violent crime rate has risen 25% since 2019, while retail theft has exploded so badly that national chains like REI, Cracker Barrel, and Nike have shut flagship stores downtown, citing safety issues. That's a death knell for tourism and commerce. But here's the stat nobody talks about. Portland's office occupancy is stuck around 55% of pre-pandemic levels, one of the worst in the nation, meaning a huge chunk of its downtown economy is simply gone. When you gut the workday foot traffic, you kill the lunch spots, the local bookstores, the art galleries, all the DNA that made Portland feel alive. Combine that with rising drug addiction and urban decay, and you've got a feedback loop of blight that even the most loyal residents are tired of defending. What's heartbreaking is that Portland still has world-class geography, a skilled workforce, and a strong sustainability ethos. But for every person moving in for nature and culture, 3 more are moving out for safety and sanity. Projections show another 1.7% population loss through 2026, cementing Portland's shift from hipster haven to urban cautionary tale. 3. Los Angeles, California. Let's be brutally honest. Los Angeles is cracking under its own weight. Once the symbol of American dream-making, by 2026 it's fast becoming the poster child for the modern urban exodus. People aren't just leaving for cheaper rent. They're escaping what feels like a system on autopilot. Between 2020 and 2024, Los Angeles County lost more than 540,000 residents, according to U.S. Census data. That's the population of an entire mid-sized city gone. The core reasons are no mystery. Median home prices now hover around $930,000, rents have climbed 30% since 2020, and energy costs are up 23% just in the last year. Add rising taxes, congested roads that turn a 10-mile commute into an odyssey, and you get a city that's economically top-heavy and logistically bottomed out. But here's the darker layer. Los Angeles isn't just expensive. It's becoming unlivable for the working class that keeps it functioning. Service workers, truck drivers, paramedics, and teachers are moving inland or out of state altogether, often to Nevada, Arizona, or Texas. According to the California Department of Finance, 1 in every 5 Angelenos under 40 plans to leave the metro area by 2026. The middle class, once the backbone of LA's endless hustle, is thinning out faster than its smog layer. Meanwhile, the city's infrastructure is aging fast. Over 40% of LA's water mains are more than 70 years old, and power grid failures during heat waves have doubled since 2018. And crime? Property thefts rose 24% year over year in 2024, while carjackings hit a 2-decade high. Here's the hidden gut punch. Despite all the luxury development and Hollywood money, Los Angeles now has over 75,000 homeless residents, the largest unsheltered population in America. When you walk through downtown, you see tent cities stretching for miles along the 101 freeway, entire neighborhoods turned into survival zones. The city's glamour and grit used to coexist. Now, the balance has snapped. LA is becoming a tale of two economies, the billionaires up in the hills and everyone else looking for an exit ramp. Projections for 2026 show another 1.9% population decline, meaning the migration train isn't slowing, it's gathering speed. 2. New York City, New York. Here's the uncomfortable truth. New York City, the capital of the world, is bleeding people faster than any other major metro in America. Between 2020 and 2024, more than 546,000 residents permanently left the 5 boroughs, according to IRS migration data, and the projections for 2026 point to another 2.1% drop, the steepest since the 1970s fiscal crisis. For decades, New York could absorb losses and bounce back through immigration and opportunity. Not anymore. The math doesn't work. The average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan hit $4,500 a month in mid-2025, the highest in U.S. history, while property taxes and utilities ballooned by 18% in just 2 years. Pair that with violent crime creeping back up, major felonies up 12% citywide since 2022, and even die-hard New Yorkers are saying enough. But here's what most media won't tell you. This isn't just about cost, it's about burnout. Post-pandemic, the remote work revolution gutted Manhattan's business districts. Office occupancy has flatlined around 48% of pre-COVID levels, meaning thousands of small restaurants, dry cleaners, and bodegas that relied on weekday workers are closing down in waves. Whole stretches of Midtown look like museum exhibits of 2019 prosperity, gleaming but hollow. The MTA, already drowning in debt, now faces a $1.3 billion shortfall, while subway ridership remains 30% below normal. Add in a growing migrant crisis that's straining public services and housing shelters to the brink, and the city's infrastructure is running on duct tape and caffeine. What's terrifying is that the cultural heartbeat, the thing that made New York magnetic, is flickering. Broadway attendance is down, nightlife curfews are creeping earlier, and the creative exodus is real. Over 28,000 artists and media workers relocated to states like Florida, North Carolina, and Tennessee in 2024 alone. The city that once prided itself on never sleeping now feels exhausted, and the symbolism cuts deep. Wall Street firms and even major media networks are quietly shifting HQs to cheaper pastures. The city that used to build dreams is now pricing them out. If trends continue, 2026 may mark the first time in modern history that New York City's population dips below 8 million. The Empire State of Mind? It's packing up and heading south. 1. San Francisco, California. There's no polite way to say it. San Francisco is collapsing in slow motion. The city that once defined innovation and freedom is now a warning label for urban decay in 2026. The data tells the story. Since 2020, San Francisco has lost over 7.5% of its population, one of the steepest drops in the nation, and experts predict another 1.8% decline by the end of 2026. The reasons stack higher than the Salesforce Tower: runaway housing costs, spiraling crime perception, and an office sector in freefall. Commercial vacancy in downtown is hovering at a record-breaking 34%, and what was once the beating heart of global tech now feels like a ghost grid of for lease signs. When the tech exodus began, people thought it was temporary, a pandemic blip. But it wasn't. Remote work unchained thousands of engineers and entrepreneurs from the Bay Area, and they never came back. Companies like Meta, Salesforce, and Twitter shed millions of square feet, leaving behind a crater of empty buildings and shuttered cafes that once fed the digital gold rush. Here's the kicker. San Francisco's tax base collapsed alongside its workforce. Property tax revenue plunged 14% in 2024 alone, and retail sales taxes, the lifeblood of city services, are now at early 2010s levels. With that shortfall came cuts to street cleaning, policing, and transit, worsening the very conditions that drive more people away. Violent crime technically declined, but rampant property theft, car break-ins, and open-air drug use have annihilated public confidence. Downtown Union Square, once packed with tourists, now feels like a post-apocalyptic film set. Walgreens, Whole Foods, Nordstrom, all closed flagship locations because of theft and safety concerns. But the most painful part is what longtime residents whisper: that the spirit is gone. The sense of belonging, of building something meaningful, replaced by boarded-up storefronts and tech millionaires hiding behind private security gates in Pacific Heights. The city's cost of living remains absurd. Median rent for a one-bedroom is $3,900. Groceries are up 22% year over year, and the average home price sits above $1.2 million. Families are fleeing to Texas, Nevada, Idaho, and Oregon, chasing affordability and peace of mind. Even die-hard natives are saying, "We'll always love it, but we can't live here anymore." The ultimate irony? San Francisco helped invent the remote work economy that killed it. The city that promised the future accidentally outsourced its own relevance. And unless something changes fast, massive zoning reform, crime control, and tax restructuring, by 2026, San Francisco could become America's first major metro to lose more residents than it gains for an entire decade straight. The Golden City isn't shining anymore. It's flickering.